masters, masters, masters of change.
Hello there. Welcome to Masters of Change. My name is Kim Cunio, and I'm the head of music at the Australian National University. And it's my great joy to be having discussions with Charlie Hogg. And Charlie is the director of the Brahma Kumaris in Australia. Welcome, Charlie.
Thanks, Kim. Lovely to be here.
We've been having, quite a series of discussions, and we go about big things, but we make them small, it seems to me, because in order to live a good life, we need to think about the big things, but unless it's practical, we're sort of missing it. So I wanted to ask you just an introductory question. How do you stay sort of sane in this modern world?
Kim, I've been practicing with the Brahma Kumaris for 45 years now, and I just have put a little structure into my life where I wake up early in the morning every single day. And I love to just sit quietly and in a way sort of step back from everything. It's almost like the drama of life is out there. Let me just step back and I first reconnect with my eternal self, the soul. Secondly, as like a little child, I sit with my spiritual parent, God. And I think it just settles down my inner world. And if there's some things that are happening in my life, it brings it into perspective. What's really important is often how I care for myself, and I really do feel that spirituality, one of the great subjects is self-care, but it's like spiritual care, emotional care, mental care, as well as physical care too. You sort of manage your inner life, and it just helps me sort of prepare myself for whatever eventuates in life. But I've really learned there's two prisms I can look through in life. One is my emotional prism, which I often think deceives me. Something happens and I can get, if the emotions flow heavily, it deceives sort of thinking, rational thinking. And the second prism is the prism of wisdom, which still has feelings too, but just to try to understand that whatever happens is the result of the past. People are trying their best, but often under the influence of their past too. And I try, because I notice that if I maintain a more compassionate or merciful outlook, I feel much better as a person. And I feel that's how we should live life, with that sort of sense of love and compassion for the other.
So really what you're saying is it starts with yourself, in seeing yourself in perspective as really a simple soul in some ways.
Yes.
There's nothing grandiose about it. Here I am, I'm just this point of light, and that's enough.
That's enough.
And from that, I can start to have that deep love of God, and I can start to be more forgiving in my relationships. Would that be just a very quick summary of how you're feeling?
Perfect, yeah.
So I wanted to spend a bit of time today, and actually in the next few episodes, on the notion of balance. When we do work in themes, Charlie, and I find the word balance very, very inspiring, because we just have to have that image. We're constantly going like this.
Yes.
Because it's a world of duality, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
So my first question is sometimes people use this term duality. Could you define what it means? What is it about being born into a body that makes balance so hard?
I think, life, Kim, at every millisecond of life, you're presented with a whole set of data, atmospheres, people's behaviours, situations, history. And in a sense, you have to make sense of that data. And I think that balance is really weighing up, all aspects and coming to a point of wisdom. Because in a sense, balance is an incredible wisdom, because it's so easy to be extremist. For instance, with eating. I think it's so important to eat healthily, but some may remove absolutely everything and go to one extreme, or some maybe their diet is extremely unhealthy, or some is But there's a balance in absolutely everything. And I feel that it's like weighing up all the sides. The duality is seeing the whole story, a holistic picture, seeing what's happening around me, and on the basis of that, my intellect, if it's absorbed truth in it, can assess how to respond appropriately in the situation for me, and maybe even what is the benefit of those around me.
I love that, Charlie, because it answers a deep question that lots of people actually ask me, which is, why can't I stop doing the things I love?
Yeah.
You know, like, for example, we have a piece of cake, it tastes great. And so then we want to have another piece of cake and another piece of cake, and eventually the cake doesn't taste so great, but we've had so much that we're a little bit affected by it.
Yeah.
And it's like we find it hard to stop the things that we like, even knowing that more than a little bit isn't so good. And yet, at the other hand, when we know something's bad for us, often we get into this flight and fight that we've talked about before, that we have a huge aversion towards the difficult things. So it's like we start from a position, if we're not careful, of having no equanimity.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to ask you, if this is a problem for so many of us, what could you suggest, to bring this greater equanimity into the daily life?
Yeah, it's a lovely question. And Kim, there's a person in Sydney, Paul Wilson, who's a writer. Paul actually used to write about meditation. He called it the calm technique, and was actually, I think, the largest selling author worldwide for a while. In his sort of meditation, which is a very sort of simple form of meditation, but I remember some years ago I asked him, he does a lot of research because his background is advertising. And he did a lot of research into professional people. And he said the main thing they wanted was balance in their life. They felt they were sort of in this extreme state of do, run, rush. And the whole sort of side of life, which is being. And, it's almost like if we're not doing anything, we feel unproductive, because it's like a lack of self-respect. And to me, equanimity, the seed of it is self-respect. When I have a sense of self-value, I don't do something to please people, or I don't sort of give in to my desires, but I keep that very equanimous sort of outlook, so that I weigh up everything and I come to a balanced perception of what is appropriate, in a particular situation. So I look after myself, I look after my family, my relationships, I look after my work and career, and I learn how to manage equanimity amongst those three competing responsibilities. And it's not that easy. I don't think it's that easy to do, especially in today's world where there's so much pressure to identify with what you do rather than who you are.
Charlie, that's very profound. When I was thinking of that question before, I also thought of the title of our little series, which is Masters of Change.
Yes.
And in a sense, to be a balanced individual is to master change, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
And it strikes me that we can only master change when on some level we master the self. So this is my next question. I loved how you talked about care for the self, care for the family, and care for the work. But how do we master the weaker part of ourselves in order to do this?
Kim, I think self-awareness is really based on knowing I'm a soul first. Secondly, knowing my strengths and weaknesses. And in a sense, thirdly, knowing my part in the drama of life, I think. And we really have to find that sort of awareness of myself as the soul. And the more I sort of really become a soul, it's like you naturally become detached, but in a sweet way. A detached objectivity, I would say, so that it's rather than you're in the drama, consumed by the drama, where you can't stand back and see all these competing elements. You are involved, but mentally you're like a detached observer, which I would say is probably the most powerful state of wisdom where you can, in that, you can see yourself and you're constantly tweaking where to find my balance. There might be a time where I really need to give time to me. I'm feeling a bit tired and exhausted. Another time I can see the family just needs my love and attention. And another time I may feel I really have to focus on work. So it's a constantly moving feast. But wisdom, the element that often is missing, though, is the self. And you know what Paul was saying to me, like I said, that he said in the old days, the balance for a professional person was family and work. In the contemporary world, it's family, work, and self, because unless I look after me, I'm not a very good family person, and sometimes I'm not a very good colleague either, because if I'm sort of peaceless or anxious or a bit depressed, we know that rubs off in my performance in the workplace or even in the family.
Charlie, I love that answer because it makes me think of how we work and how different it is to, say, even one generation ago. Because we hear the phrase multitasking, but what multitasking means is we have 4 or 5 things that can take our balance away. We might be at work, but we're actually having a meeting. We have a big problem to solve. There might be an issue with money. And then there's 10 or 20 emails all at the same time. And then there's the notion of how I personally feel about my work. All of these things just in the notion of work. And it strikes me, unless we can bring ourselves and ground ourselves into a state of more acceptance and more love at work, that it's going to be almost impossible. So what do you think we could do in our daily working life to bring about this balance?
I think, Kim, it all begins with the self in the morning. And I feel that the way to deal with the world at the moment is, I first have to care for the self, because if I use the early morning to meditate a little bit, maybe absorb some truth or wisdom by reading something, it's sort of I step into the day and I've sort of nurtured my inner world. And I'm preparing, I know the workplace and I know the personalities in the workplace, and I prepare myself to deal with the issues that are going to come in front, and even the personalities too. You and I have been talking a lot about benevolence and its incredible power in relationships. And sometimes I think if I see the workplace, it's not just a place where I earn $1. It's actually a place where I contribute. I'm actually going there wanting to create, a harmonious atmosphere, etc. So I do feel that if I wake up in the morning, I have that detached objectivity, I have those benevolent feelings, and I'm in my self-respect. When I step into the workplace, it's almost like I've got my tools to work, my spiritual tools. Now, my physical tools at work might be my computer, but my spiritual tools are going to help me negotiate. Because really, what is work? Work is dealing with people for many of us.
Yes, it seems to me like if we don't spend this time in the morning, or for some it might be the evening, could also help, we're going to be running out of this sort of capital, the capital of equanimity, very, very quickly, because maybe 1 or 2 or 3 tests will come along, but then we'll start to take things personally. And I think what you're saying is we need a method in our lives, and we should be the experimenters to find that method. We need a method to make sure that we can rebalance ourselves.
It's so good you say that, Kim, because what I've noticed is each human being has their own balance, because we have a different personality and a different set of responsibilities. So we have to find what works for me. And for instance, in the workplace, you might have a plan of what I'm going to achieve today, but you get into the office and you can see someone's miserable. And I feel that wisdom is, I can really see this as, I'm going to have to set my plan aside for now and care for this individual and give time to this individual. So I feel that you can be fluid. You can be fluid. It's not like a rigid sort of thing. But in a way, when you're always coming from that spiritual place, that benevolent place, I think that it's almost like you've got the tools to know where to give attention and for how long. And I feel sometimes too that if I've given too much to something, a little voice tells me I'm now wasting time rather than using time resourcefully. You know how you give the time to something, but you can overdo it too. So there's this constant little meter going on inside your head, just sort of tweaking what I need to do at this moment to keep myself happy, my family happy, and my working life happy.
Well, when you say that, Charlie, I think of the word boundaries. And this is a big thing for all of us. I mean, it seems, you've said in a past episode, we all have a PhD in giving away our power, and in actually becoming miserable if we're not careful. And it seems to me that really the heart of it is, how do I stay true to myself? If I really sit down and I say, I am not this body, I am something deeper, my primary journey is not to make money, or is not to just accumulate this or that, but it's something on a deeper level. I must honour it every day, and I must bring that energy into the workplace, and I must care for the family. But if I don't care for myself, on the fundamental level, it's like my watering can has a hole in it, and the water's falling out even as I'm trying to water the leaves outside.
And Kim, all the language we hear these days of burnout and exhaustion and depression, I think it's because I see my life out there, and I try to achieve out there, and we have no control. We're in an environment, but in here I have control. And if I take back control of my inner environment, then when I step into all the changing, moving, fluid scenes of life, you roll with the flow. And you have to these days. I think I would say a huge virtue is flexibility, just to be absolutely flexible with what is happening in front of us. But I really love what you just said. I just think that the seed of everything is giving time to me. It doesn't have to be a lot of time, but it's almost like I feel my spiritual pulse. I feel my heart, am I okay? Because I'm my own doctor, really. Others will love me in that, but really a part of spirituality, I have to take responsibility for me.
Charlie, this is I think, very practical advice. So I have another practical question. Now, all of us, or many of us anyway, have this little thing. It's about so big, and it does about 1 million things. And it's very, very addictive. So how do we balance out the sheer joy and the capability of a phone with the need to have an internal life?
Yeah. Now, you just talked about boundaries, and actually when you said that, Kim, we have to self-apply boundaries with technology. And we have to say certain times, I'm not going to, when I meditate, when I do this, when I do that. So this is where balance comes in. I'm not rejecting phones. Some people reject them, or I'm not completely controlled by them. I use them because I'm the master, and I decide when I'll use the phone. Personally, I feel phones, how really why we love them is it entertains an overactive mind. And really, if we don't have this constant entertainment, the mind will go all over the place. So this is sort of constantly entertaining me, but it's quite addictive. And this is a perfect example. I need a boundary with, technology. I need many, many boundaries. And if I have spiritual power, I will apply discipline to myself to stick to my boundaries. For instance, I get home at night, rather than just sitting down in front of the TV, I have a shower and I maybe meditate. And I leave the day behind. I just say, okay, a lot of things happen at work, I'm going to learn from it, but I'm going to sit down and you freshen up physically, mentally it's like you clear. Even before sleep, if you meditate well before sleep, your dreams are different. Because you take into your sleep a whole different energy. And when you sleep well, you wake up fresher. We all know that if you go to sleep with an overactive mind, you wake up exhausted, like you've run a marathon in your sleep.
Well, you have.
It's a bit like that, isn't it?
And you talk a lot about getting up early in the morning. Many people say to me when I'm around, because I work in a field where in academia there's a lot of stress for people, and the amount of times someone says to me, I can't sleep at night.
Yeah.
What do I do?
Yeah.
So I'd like to ask you that question, and I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from you.
That's amazing, isn't it, Kim? I think from my memory until the 70s, maybe the 80s, there were no sleep clinics in hospitals. It's now an absolute part of all hospitals these days because we can't sleep. What I feel that we need to do is really, I would say, deal with my mental issues when they come up. Because what we tend to do is during the day something happens, we suppress it. We push it down. Oh, I didn't like what she said. I didn't like this. So what happens? You put your head on the pillow at night and all the unfinished business that you've suppressed during the day comes out. I feel that when I apply wisdom to scenes, I resolve it. But before I sleep, I just have a few minutes of connection. And in a way, I resolve any unfinished business, and I also just cool the inner world down. Almost like in front of God, I clear my accounts. And if there's something to learn, I need to learn, be honest with myself. It's almost like you're clearing the account of that day, so you wake up in the morning with a clean slate. Otherwise, we all know you can wake up in the morning with all the issues still bubbling inside your head from yesterday. So you have this accumulation of unfinished business in your head constantly.
Charlie, that's beautiful. In a second, I'm going to ask you to do what you do every time for us, which is to take us on that inner journey. I just wanted to say one thing to all of us, because it's easy for us to say, you should get a good night's sleep, and you might feel, well, I've really tried. One of the things I want to say is, it's almost impossible to get through everything you need to get through at work now. Yeah. And so on some level, we need to forgive ourselves because it's not our fault. It's actually the state of the larger world. The world is changing and we're doing our best to adapt. It's changing at such a rate, some people call it the Iron Age right now. And Charlie, what do you think of that notion before we meditate?
Yeah, I would really say that what we're noticing, isn't it, Kim, is that everything is sort of increasing in dysfunction. Almost all the systems and institutions of our world are sort of becoming more and more dysfunctional. And so it's sort of the Iron Age is really the mass consciousness of humanity. And when the mass consciousness is more and more body conscious and self-indulgent, we get this sort of not such a sweet fragrance in our world. And maybe that's a wonderful subject you and I can talk about sometime again.
Well, let's do that. But for now, please balance us.
In life, we need to absorb wisdom. And one of the greatest wisdoms in life is to find balance in every situation, in every interaction with a family member or a work colleague. I need to assess the atmosphere, the emotions, the state of mind, the situation, the consequences, and respond appropriately. That may seem like a lot, but when I naturally become self-aware, it's almost like I stand back from the drama of life and I naturally become objective. I don't get emotional or biased about any particular perspective. But the more I become detached from my body, I step back, I withdraw, and I sit so lightly in the forehead. I, the tiny soul. And I look through my third eye at all these situations, and in an instant I find a balanced perspective. If each morning I wake and I become detached from my body, the eternal soul, I increase my ability to develop this detached objectivity. And in so doing, I will find more and more balance in my life. Om Shanti.
Thank you, Charlie. So may all of us be able to care for our families in our daily lives. May we discharge our duties in work with joy and equanimity. But most of all, may we care for ourselves every day so that we can have this balance. It is all of our right and birthright to be balanced, to love ourselves and to have this love of God. Thank you again, Charlie.
Thank you, Kim.